I'm gonna hit record, which I already did.
This is gonna be fun.
I know, trying to capture some like reality kind of thing here. And I'm in New York City, so it's noisy, and it's either close the window and turn on the AC, which then creates this hum noise, or leave it. Yeah, leave it. And so often what I'll do is like when I'm not talking, I'll often put myself on mute, and you may see that. So yeah, because it's just noisy. But anyway, so I used to do the spiel in the beginning, but I realized I hate doing it because it just sounds, I don't know, it sounds stupid the way I do it.
JJ, you're in entertainment. You're a musician. You're supposed to do spiel. You know?
Right? I am
practice.
I am like the worst ever.
No, you're just very harsh critic of yourself. That's all.
It's maybe, but it's also it's not something I like doing.
I understand that. I get that.
Yeah. I say that I'm a very reluctant performer. It's something, especially when it comes to music, it's something that I feel I'm compelled to do for some reason. I don't know why. There's something inside me that says, do it. But I don't like getting in front of people.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I love doing art, and actually I love music too, but I just do it, in solitude. and then, when you have to actually promote your art, it's like, nah. It's like, no, I'm really awful at it.
I know.
So when it was time to promote the book, I got incredibly sick, and then everything hit the fan. And, for the 2 months that I was really supposed to be pushing it, I didn't do it. And when I was done, it's like, do I have to put myself out there? I don't really want to. So, I had already geared myself up. The opportunity passed, and I did get the word out, but not as well as I could have. Exactly for the same reason that you don't like to do the intros. It's like, I just stink at this.
Yeah. But so the last episode, I actually didn't do the intro, and me and my guest, we just started talking. And then when I viewed it afterwards, I realized I actually didn't introduce the person either. So let me do that at least. So Donna Kemper, Donna Kemper, artist, author, and reluctant exhibitionist. Reluctant podcaster. Yes, that's true. And welcome to Beer Cake. And today, well, we're going to be talking about your book a lot, but also just your life, your journey through that time period in your life that you capture in your book, and it's called Forgive. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, yep. Forgive and Forgotten. Forgive
which
and Forgotten.
Which is not grammatically correct, and I know that. But you also know from following me on Facebook that I like wordplay. Yes. And so this was a play on words that I would choose to forget, and I would always be forgotten. So because of mom's Alzheimer's, so you forgive, that's forgotten, and you have to forgive all over again, and that's forgotten, and it just keeps going.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that is true, because the person with whom you're dealing with this matter of forgiveness is somebody who's going through Alzheimer's, which means that it's kind of like that movie 50 Dates or 50 First Dates or something like that, where Drew Barrymore and I think is it Adam Sandler? I forget.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I remember the movie, but I don't remember who they.
Yeah. So
she'd wake up every day and not remember him.
Not remember that she's actually married to this guy, and she would be like, "Who's this stranger in my bed?" So he would have to like do this. I actually didn't see the movie. I only know about it from the trailers, and But
sometimes that tells you just enough.
Pretty much.
I find as I get older, I just watch the trailers. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, it's like, because I think that's life. When you get to a certain age, right? You've lived enough to know that there's certain recurring themes.
There are, and you also think, do I really want to invest 2 hours of my life in this? Is it going to be worth it? And because time gets shorter, and it's like, maybe.
Yeah.
Certainly, if I'm with a friend and they want to go, yeah. But if it's on my own,
that's true. Certain movies, like it's much better when you're viewing it as a group with other people.
Yes, it is.
There is this one movie that has become my recent favorite, and I've watched it at least a dozen times. And I don't really do that with movies that much. Like maybe I'll watch it twice or 3 times, and that's about it. But it's called Little Miss Sunshine.
I haven't seen the old one. Because there was one like done in the 80s or 90s. Is that the one?
No, this is definitely after 2000, maybe 2010-ish, or I don't know, or maybe even a little before that. I guess then this is a remake. I don't know. Yeah, but what I like about it is it's a bunch of misfits. Basically, it's about a family, and the story arc is basically a quest. It's a quest story arc as opposed to a hero's journey kind of story arc.
Okay, this isn't a remake. This is a new movie. What is it?
Okay, but anyway, so the quest is they have to get their little girl out to California because she made it to the Little Miss Sunshine beauty pageant. It's for kids, and but it's a misfit of a family, and so all kinds of funny things happen. And it's like, it's one of those things where I think maybe because I feel like I'm a misfit, or I consider myself a misfit, and so I kind of identify with, I guess, pretty much every member of that family.
Is it a nice family or is it dysfunctional? I mean, you can be quirky and still function well in love, or you can be weird and not function well in love.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's dysfunction. Ultimately, they stay together and they work together, and that's sort of by the end they feel closer. But yeah, there's also still a lot of dysfunction. Just like any family.
I know dysfunction. Boy, I know that well.
Yes. So that's a nice segue, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you want to ask me?
Well, I think the topic of forgiveness is very difficult, right?
Yes.
And I was thinking about this. Is it harder to ask for forgiveness, or is it harder to actually forgive? I think it's the latter.
I think both can be challenging.
Yes.
Both, it depends on what you've done. If Mike, my husband, asks me to address an envelope a certain way and I forget because I'm used to doing it a different way, I'm truly sorry, and I will try to repair whatever that is. That's easy to ask forgiveness for, and on the flip side, it's easy to offer forgiveness for something like that. If I have done something that I don't see as an issue, but it has hurt somebody and they are angry and they want me to apologize for something I don't think I've done, then it's hard to ask for forgiveness. It's like, what is this about? And, where is this coming from? And is it a big deal? And you have to, or I've had to in the past, just kind of stop and think, okay, it matters to this person. It matters to this person. And it doesn't matter if I think I'm right or wrong. What matters is relationship. And I have to humble myself and offer an apology and offer change if it's a reasonable thing. Now, if I'm sorry, I thought I turned that off. If it's a dysfunctional thing, then you have to weigh, do I ask for forgiveness for something that really is not an issue, but it's showing this person's dysfunction? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes.
My mother was constantly angry. And I think that anger was covering up fear, but she made life miserable for anybody who was close around her. And she was always demanding. And as I became an adult, I realized I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't me. There was something wrong with her. And to ask for forgiveness where there was no reason for it, then I had to stop that for my own sake. And then that makes life tricky, because if you've been raised in a dysfunctional atmosphere and always told that everything is your fault, and then you have to learn what real forgiveness is, how to ask for it and how to give it, and when to ask for it and when to say, no, we're going to cut this off now. So yeah, it's tricky. Forgiveness is just hard all the way around. When somebody has betrayed you on a deep level and then say something very flippant like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, are you? Yeah. And then, because forgiveness is hard work, and to just carelessly betray somebody and then say, oh, it's no big deal. Do I offer forgiveness in that situation? I don't know. Every situation is different.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, we're going to dive right in. You said you wanted to talk about.
Yes. Let's, the deeper the dive, the better, especially for a topic like this. And you're right. Every situation is different. It also depends on the relationship between the people, what kind of relationship they have, what kind of a grievance it is. If it's truly something that I did wrong to hurt the other person, whether it was intentional or not, or is it a function of the other person's dysfunction, as you said, or it could also be a misunderstanding. It could be so many things.
Yeah, there are.
Yes. But I think one thing you said, though, at the end of it, though, is it's ultimately about the relationship. That what's needed, whether it's asking for forgiveness or giving forgiveness, or maybe it's clearing up misunderstanding or whatever it is, but ultimately it is about the relationship and making the relationship better or functional or whole, or however you want to put it. Yeah. So do you want to start talking about your relationship with your mother, because that's what the book is about?
Well, okay.
or where do you want to start?
JJ, I trust you. You tell me where you want to start.
Okay, maybe you shouldn't trust me.
No, I do. I know it might be uncomfortable, but I do.
Yeah. Okay. So let's put the context, because there are a few things that you said already, that you grew up in a dysfunctional environment, And I will admit that I didn't finish your book, but I did start it. And so I do know the context of this story. You didn't really know your father. Did you know him at all?
No, they divorced when I was 4. I think they separated when I was 3. He did not support my mother or me, and I believe he came to visit one time when I was 6, but because of how erratic he was in support, Mom asked him not to reveal that he was my father.
I see.
So I didn't realize that visit was someone significant to me, but apparently I liked him a lot.
Oh.
And but I never saw him again.
Yeah.
And then I found out on one of the ancestry.com, with a DNA test, I learned that he had died in 1993.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, and it was any kind of fantasy that I had about someday reconnecting or finding him, or just exploring what on earth that was all about, was gone because he had died.
Mm.
So I had to work through that. But yeah, my parents really were two very immature people who really shouldn't have gotten married and really shouldn't have had kids. But
was it just you, or do you have siblings?
Just me. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God, because seriously, I would have been the oldest one, and then I would have had to take, it was hard enough taking care of myself.
Right.
And I know people who have had to take care of siblings, and I don't know that I have the strength for that. It was hard enough just to make it on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, in some cases where you have siblings, it makes the siblings grow closer and they kind of help each other. That happens sometimes. Yeah.
My family dynamics were more about pitting people against each other.
I see.
And I think, and you never know, because it has a different personality, and maybe it would have worked, but as it was, I kept getting pitted against my cousins, against, it's like, well, why can't you be like her? Or why can't you be like him? Or and it's like, that would have been on steroids if it had been siblings. Yeah. And so no, it was just me.
Yeah. And in your book, you said that you pretty much grew up until you were about 12 or 13, I think, with your grandparents.
Yes, I did.
And then at that time you moved in with your mother, and that's sort of when. So
things got interesting.
Things got interesting, yes. Was your time with your grandparents, what was that like? Was it good, or was it?
That is something that psychologists would call benevolent neglect. I had food and shelter, and I got to go to school, and I was taken to church, but pretty much left on my own. So I had a 40-acre farm that I could go and play with, and my cousins were on the farm next to me, so I could always run over there and have somebody to hang out with. And so I was pretty much left to my own devices. And fortunately, here's the cat.
What's the cat's name?
That one is Willow.
Willow. Nice.
Yes.
Big furry tail.
Yes, she and her daughter were alley cat rescues. And so
wow.
They're very pushy.
My experience with cats has always been they get what they want.
Yes, within reason.
Yeah.
We're going to go through that a lot. I'm really sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. So, okay. So
I'm sorry. So we were talking about being on the farm.
Yeah.
And so the farm was great, and I loved school, so I loved to learn. So I was pretty much on my own. My grandparents were immigrants from what they called the Old Country, which was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. In fact, my grandfather had stowed away on a boat to come to the United States at age 14. And
wow.
so, yeah. So it gives a whole view. I have a very different viewpoint on immigration because, my grandfather was a stowaway. So when, people need to get someplace safe. And so he did the best he could, because at 15 in the Austrian Empire at that time, boys were conscripted into the army. And so he was trying to avoid that, because it was just, people got chewed up and spit out, and he was just trying to get away from that. But he was a deeply flawed man. Even though he did work to get his family over here, he worked very hard to do that. And once he did, that was it. He had pretty much done all he wanted to in life. And he was a miserable husband and a miserable father. And
Oh, wow.
But I had the benefit of him having a massive stroke right when I came to live with him. And because of that, I did not suffer the violence that he had done to the rest of his family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then it was just you and your grandmother and your cousins.
Well, my grandfather did recover and had some function, but he wasn't able to physically do things.
Okay. So he had a stroke, but he didn't die.
He didn't die.
So, okay. Was he invalid or?
No, he did eventually gain the ability to walk, but he didn't have the same kind of strength that he had before. So he had to quit farming, and his son took over the farm. He just did not have the same kind of quality of life as he had one time. She will eventually settle down, I promise.
No, maybe I should have booked her as a guest.
I could do that next time.
No.
You want, I'll just put it right here.
It's fine. It could be the cat show. It could literally be the cat video.
Hey, they're very popular with booster ratings.
Yes. Okay, so I mean, in a way that was fortunate.
It was a huge blessing for me. I mean, perhaps not for him, but I'm sure for my grandmother and for me. So it didn't mean that he still wasn't an angry man.
Right.
But English was not his primary language. So when he really got worked up, it was in German, and what did I care?
Did you pick up any of the German while growing up?
Not much. I remember one time, I was around 5 or 6, and my grandfather had said I could share some blueberries with him. So I was standing next to him and eating them. And he started talking to my grandmother, and it was really clear that he was mad that I was eating the blueberries, and they're having this conversation. And finally I said, well, you said I could. And they both were absolutely shocked, because they always used German to hide what they were talking about in front of me. So, I could pick up some things, but I don't know German. I don't know any German at all.
Yeah. Is the German culture where you kind of offer something but don't really mean it? Because like the Korean culture is sort of this is an aspect of the Korean culture that I don't like necessarily, is the sort of polite refusal. So you're offered something and you're expected to refuse because that's being polite. So but if you accept it, that's a little rude. But if you flip the table, if I offer something and they refuse it, and having grown up here, I'm like, okay, they refuse it, they don't want it. No, but that's rude to not offer it again.
Yeah, I have some Asian friends, and I think that's not just Korean. I think it's Chinese as well. I don't know about Japan, but
yeah, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Germans have their own weird things and every culture does, but with Germans, it's very much, you have to earn respect. You have to earn love. You're just not loved. You have to earn it. And so that makes it really interesting when you become a Christian, trying to receive God's grace.
Yes.
when you're taught that you're supposed to earn it. So it's a lot of anger in the German culture, at least in the German culture I was raised in.
Yeah, which is interesting because if you think about it, it is the German and maybe Austrian kind of setting where Martin Luther and Calvinism sprung up, which basically says, no, it's unconditional love. You didn't do anything to deserve it. It is given to you unconditionally. So that's rather contradictory and ironic.
Countercultural, yeah.
Countercultural. So maybe there is something to that, right? Because maybe it was so that theologians had to say, like, no, you know what? I think God is completely different from us.
I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah. So why was it that when you were 12, right? I think when you were 12, you moved from your grandparents to your mother's. Did something happen, or why were you moved?
Well, it was kind of a combination of things. My grandparents were getting older. Grandma was starting to have health issues, which grew into severe health issues, which led to her death. And Mom always had the goal of having me live with her, but she lived in apartments in Detroit. She didn't have a real home, and just was saving her money to get a house. And so she finally was able to get a house in one of the Detroit suburbs. And then the plan was that not only was I going to move there, but my grandparents would too. And a year later they did. But then Grandma's health was so bad, she didn't live with us very long, which is too bad because she was the buffer between us. She was a poor woman.
Yes. Did your grandmother act as the buffer when you were living in her farm?
I think so. I think she buffered between my grandfather and I quite a bit. And my mother would come and visit every other weekend. And at those times, Grandma was in a really strange situation. You know, she was my primary caregiver. She was more my mother than anybody. But when my mother came, she had to take a step back, because if she corrected my mother on something she was doing with me, that was not welcomed. And my mother was more like my grandfather than she was like my grandmother.
I see.
So fireworks would go off.
Yeah.
So then when Mom would go back to Detroit, a lot of times I would ask Grandma about what had happened the weekend. And as best she could, she would try to explain it while trying to foster respect and honor for my mother, whom she knew was not doing a good job, but tried to help her anyway.
Wow, your grandmother was some woman.
She was an uneducated woman. I don't think she got past what we would call second or third grade. And she was basically the family slave of her mother and stepfather and his 3 boys. She had a really awful upbringing, and she had a really awful marriage. And somewhere along the line, she found faith. And that she had, I said in the book, she had the faith of Abraham. She was able to pray about things that she would never see, but she still believed it. She still would pray for me, for my future, for her children. She just prayed a lot. And I don't know that she ever saw the fruit of those prayers, because I did not come to any kind of faith until after she was gone. Neither did my mother. My grandfather did eventually come to faith right before he died. And it's like, yeah, I don't know how she did it. I really don't know how she did it.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know how my mother does it either. Well, yeah, I don't want to get too much into that. Well, okay, I'll get into it maybe later. But okay, let's.
We can do it now. Amazing, you know, it's, these women should be honored. They're complicated, but you know, they're also amazing, and their stories need to be told. Part of the reason I told my story is to tell grandma's story. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and if you think about it, that's interesting, because there's your grandmother and your mother and you. So it's 3 generations of women. Well, the reason why I don't really want to get into me and my mother is that we don't always get along. So it's a difficult story.
It's a mother-daughter thing. It's some are worse than others, but it's a mother-daughter dynamic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What is up with that?
Can't tell you, because you know, I'm not a mother, so I don't really know. I suspect part of it is jealousy. You know, jealousy for, I mean, I had opportunities that my mother or grandmother never had.
Yeah.
And, you know, as you're aging and somebody's younger and has, you know, more opportunities, kind of, I'm sure there's an aspect of, man, she doesn't know how good she has it, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if it's that. Well, I think between me and my mother, I think I often just kind of consider it personality conflicts. So I in my personality, I feel like I'm a combination of me, my mother, and my father. But the aspects of my personality and my mother's personality where we're alike are also the places where we clash the most.
Yeah.
So we're the same in the dysfunctional aspects of how we are together.
I think that's just normal.
And I think we may also bring it out in each other too. You know, it's like the more she is a certain way, the more I am like that, and sort of match, you know, that level of
escalated up a little.
Yes. And it's just,
I'll show you.
Yeah. And also different from your situation where after you grew up, you and your mother, you became estranged for 10 years, I think you said.
I think it was close to 11. But.
Okay. 11 years. In my case, she's been living with me for 25.
And you're living with your mom, so it's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different thing. But anyway, yeah, let's come back to that. Get back to you. So yes,
you'll find that talking with me is like going down a lot of rabbit trails, just so you know. I do that.
It's been like that with every guest. I think it's me. I think I'm the rabbit hole chaser.
Okay, the 2 of us together is going to make a very interesting time. But I do have to get off at 1 because I have to take Mike for his second COVID shot.
Okay. Oh, okay. Today's COVID. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So your grandmother really was the pillar in your family, keeping everyone together. And her being the recipient of the abusive natures of your grandfather and your mother, it's a different kind of strength.
And her sons. Oh. Yeah. She got it everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started becoming a teenager, I started seeing that behavior come out in me too, which just broke my heart that, mom was always screaming at her about something. And something happened one day getting ready for school. And I did the same thing. And I just was heartsick. That's not the person I wanted to be. And I just remember the look on her face of being so hurt and realizing that no, can't be like this. Can't be like this.
How old were you when that happened?
I was probably 14.
Okay. So, I mean, so you're old enough to,
To process. Yeah. First, it was a reaction, but it was a reaction that had been modeled for me. Mm-hmm. And then there was the thought process of, no, you don't like it in others. You don't want to do it yourself. But of course, you can think that, but having the power to do anything about that is something separate. And you can have all the best intentions, but it's a process to learn to be a better person.
It really is. And there's a level of a will that you have to summon up to make that decision. And then a series of conscious choices. Like you have to constantly, consciously make the decision to not be, not fall into that habit or that tendency.
You do, but sometimes, that's not enough. And sometimes you have to go into counseling to get the right tools to kind of reset your thinking and so that your behavior goes. So I'm a big proponent of going into counseling and just learning good tools to process life better than what you have. No matter how functional you are, counseling does not hurt. So I'm really a big proponent for counseling.
You call yourself, or your website is The Pastoral Artist. Mm-hmm. And is it, are you a pastor? Is that why it's called The Pastoral Artist?
How much down the faith road do you want to go with this?
Okay. Oh no, let's go anywhere. Let's okay. Go wherever it takes us.
Yeah. Okay. I have been commissioned as a Stevens minister, which is a care pastoral sort of thing. I came up with the name, or the name was dropped into me one day when I went to a writer's conference because I was working on this manuscript. I didn't know why I was working on this manuscript. I do not consider myself a writer. And, but I just felt compelled that I needed to write that story and to be as vulnerable and as honest as I could. So there's some ugly things in there because that's how I felt and that's what was going on. But the feedback I've got from that raw honesty has been really positive because other caregivers have said, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. So, yeah. So as I was going to this writer's workshop, they were really impressing on the need for a blog and a website. And I was like, oh, just one more thing I have to do, which is, if you have seen my website and you know it's in desperate need of revamping. But when I first set it up, it was much better than it is now. And I thought, okay, I have to do this. What do I call it? And it was like that name was just kind of dropped, The Pastoral Artist, because yeah, I do pastoral work, although I don't have the title, and I don't really want the title, because to be a pastor in this country, in this culture, is toxic. There's so many pastors burn out after 7 years. There's so much scandal. There's so much because it's not designed the way God designed the church. He designed all the gifts to work together and not to have just one person at the pulpit overseeing everything. So a pastoral gift is a mercy gift, and it's a gift that comes alongside a person in crisis and tends to their soul, where we call it, everything. It's like a catch-all phrase for everything. So I use it more in the biblical sense of a pastoral. And so I've got an artist group that meets at the studio, and they consider me their pastor, whether for good or bad. And and I come alongside of people in crisis, usually artists, and so I'm a pastor in that sense, in the sense of spiritual gifting, of pastoral and mercy.
Yes, and that's the sense I got, actually.
Now, if you ask me to be an administrative gift, that's not going to fly. You're going to be deeply disappointed.
And the gift of pastoring is it is a spiritual gift. It's not church administration. It's not, position of power necessarily. But, and I would maybe, I don't know, maybe the term lay pastor, I don't know. I've heard that term also. Somebody who, ministers spiritually to their fellow, church member or fellow human being.
Because it doesn't have to be somebody in the church.
Exactly.
You can come alongside. There's been times I've been out in public, and I'm pretty sure the person that I'm caring for has no idea who Jesus is, and really doesn't care at that moment. They're in crisis. They need somebody to listen to them. I'm free, and I can, just sit there and listen. Listening is a big thing. Not many people do it.
It is a huge thing. And I think that's something we also need to learn how to do. I think I used to be a better listener than I am now.
I think so too. I used to be a really good listener. Now it takes more effort.
Right?
And it's one of those things.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the attention span or stamina or,
It does take a lot out of you. I don't think people really understand, because active listening isn't just sitting there and going, It's like processing it. And for me, it's also praying. So I'm listening to the person, but I'm also trying to listen to the voice of God. And, it's very active. And you do that for a few hours and you're wasted. You're just wasted.
Yeah. So let's go back to our main story. So you're 12, you move back and with your mother, and soon after that, both your grandparents move in. So your grandfather is still alive. Okay. And so that's what was that like? I'm sure not big happy family.
Before I was on a farm with 40 acres.
Yes.
Now I'm in a 2-bedroom, small, tiny ranch with, for them, it's a large yard, but for somebody from 40 acres, this is like a postage stamp. And so there's no place to hide. There's no place to go. I just have to be with this family. And grandma was hospitalized a lot after she moved in. She spent more time in the hospital than she did at home. And when I was 15 is when she passed away. And my grandfather, who made her life a living nightmare, told me he would not be able to live 6 months without her, which did not make sense. And there was nothing wrong with him. And within 6 months, he was gone. So that's how weird dysfunctional families work.
I think that there's also a kind of a codependency that develops between the abuser and the abused. That in some way the abuser needs the abused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've been together for 50 years. So
there's that.
Yeah. He needed that. And
yeah.
And he was gone, which was actually good for me because like I said, my mother was very much like her father, and to have two of them, even though they were different generations, and even though physically my grandfather could not act out his anger, he was still a difficult man. And so when he was gone, at least I had some hours in the day of peace. Because mom worked, and she was working first in Detroit and then in one of the suburbs of Detroit, but she was like an hour's drive or 40-minute drive away from home. So from the time I got out of school till the time she got home around 6, I had space to breathe. And that was, I'm so glad I had that. That was necessary.
And back then, I mean, did you have like after school programs or?
I was not allowed to do any of that.
Oh,
I was
really?
very isolated. Yeah, because the idea of, and this is a little bit what you were talking about culturally, but if I was given an invitation to go someplace to somebody's house after school, that would mean that we would have to reciprocate. And mom didn't want to do that. She wasn't proud of her house. She was very aware of social differences much more than I was. She was not a woman who entertained. And so she did not want to have to reciprocate. So the easy way is to just deny me any kind of social life. So I did not do anything. I didn't have transportation because she was at work. And, but I was a member of the junior high and the high school band, the marching band. So that was my social network. And I was able to do things because I was part of the band. They were my peeps.
What did you play?
Flute.
The flute. Nice.
Yep.
Have you kept it up?
My flute is broken right now and I need to replace it. And I'm kind of thinking about maybe taking lessons again to get a little more proficiency. I was okay at my senior year. I was the first chair, but I didn't keep it up. I went to college and I started out, and then I realized the time commitment it was going to take was not something that I wanted to do with everything else that was in my life at that time. So that's when I quit doing it on a regular basis. And I do miss it, but my embouchure needs a lot of work.
I think you need to get your flute fixed.
I do, or a replacement. I mean, gosh, the thing is, I'm not even going to tell you how many years old it is because I got it when I was in 5th grade. So
wow. Yeah, it's a family heirloom. Well, don't throw it out, even if you don't.
No, but I'm due for an upgrade. But believe me.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, when you went to college, did you study art? Did you know you wanted to be an artist?
You know, I always did art as a kid, but I was raised in a poverty, a genteel poverty. I had enough food to eat. And because mom worked at Sears, I was able to dress like I was middle class. So I think I didn't get some of the pushback that some people do in poverty, but it was more a genteel poverty. I had food, I had clothes, but I didn't have opportunity. And the idea, guess who's back? The idea of somebody having a living as an artist, especially a woman, was like, no, that's not even in the cards. So when I went to college, at first, it was for psychology, because as I said, I really see the need for good counselors. And I'm sorry, she distracted me. And I was thinking about going into art therapy. So I did a double major in psychology and art, but I quickly realized then, and I think people are more open to counseling now than they were, 40 years ago.
Definitely, yeah.
But back at that time, the only time you went into counseling was when it was court mandated. And there really isn't much hope of somebody doing lifestyle changes if somebody's making them do it. And I realized that my personality is such that if I offer you a way to fix your problem and you don't do it, I am going to go crazy. It's like, I just get too invested. And so I went more into the art after that. It's like, you know what? This is, psychology is not the place for me. I can't separate enough from it. And so I went on and just focused in the art.
But eventually you did find your way back into counseling.
Did. Yes. Isn't that funny? God has a sense of humor, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, it's like there's no denying something that he's given you to do. It's like eventually, you have to find, you will find your way to do it. So how, when did you eventually move out of your mother's home?
Well, the first time was when I was 19. I went away to college, but I came back for a year because I thought I had met the one. So I came home and I got a job and I was saving up so that we could get married. And, his dream was to be a pastor, which, oh my gosh, me as a pastor's wife is a disaster. That would have been a terrible, terrible, terrible mix. And I did eventually realize that and broke it off. And so I took the money that I was saving and started looking for a job anywhere in the United States. So I started just putting out different applications, and I got a job at a college, at a Christian college in Grand Rapids. Go away. In Grand Rapids. And so I moved here when I was in my early 20s. I don't remember exactly how old I was.
So from Detroit to Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm. My goal was, my first plan was I was going to keep moving west. I was going to first move to Grand Rapids, work here 3 to 5 years. Then I was going to try to get a job in Chicago, work there for a while, and I was going to just kind of work my way west. And but when I came to Grand Rapids, I decided to go back to college and finish my degree. And so as I did that, then I met Mike, who is the one. And so I'm still here. Never made it to Chicago, although I visit quite a bit.
So Mike is from Grand Rapids?
No, he's originally from Ohio.
Oh, okay.
And then his family, his father worked in the chemical industry, and Dow bought their company. So then he moved, as a teenager, he moved to Midland and he lived there. And then after he got out of college, he was looking for a job. He ended up in Grand Rapids, and we were supposed to meet here, I guess.
Yeah. But you also decided to settle there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's Grand Rapids like?
Well, right now it's very conservative.
Okay.
I'm an odd duck here, but they're waiting to see how things shake out after this last election, because there is a huge influence of the evangelical church in this city. It's the home of different Christian publishing companies like Baker, Erdman, Zondervan. There's a huge influence of the Christian Reformed Church here. And it's just, this past election cycle, it became very toxic, and as it has all over the United States. But here, especially, it's extremely conservative, and there's a lot of people now pushing back on that and asking, how the church reacted to basically, and I'll probably get some people mad at me here. I hope you're ready for that. But
it's fine.
For idolatry, for taking a person who is clearly not a person of faith and setting them up as an idol, and then worshiping them, that they can do no wrong. And it led to a complete breakdown of civilization as we knew it. And there's a question of, okay, talk about forgiveness. I am really struggling at this point to know how to do community with people that I've known for years, who all of a sudden started posting just hateful things on social media and claiming that it was a way of expressing faith. It's like, I don't know what Jesus you know, but this is not the way he expressed that we were supposed to follow him. And so, yeah, this new era that we're coming into is going to require a lot of forgiveness, and not necessarily trust yet. That's going to be earned.
There's so much to unpack in that.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. It's just like, just even having, and the part of the reason why I wanted to have a podcast is so that we could have these difficult discussions. But like, when it comes to how politics, especially in the past couple of cycles, national elections, how religion and the religious community and the political community, there was an interesting sort of, I don't know, alchemy or something. It was sort of like an unnatural, unholy kind of union.
Very. It's a perfect way of describing it. It is an unholy union.
It was just, and part of me though, my personal take on it is that they didn't actually believe what they were saying. They were just pushing their political agenda, and this was the way to do it. Well,
some people felt that way, but some people actually doubled down, and you will not convince them that he is not a righteous man.
That is unfathomable. See, now he's from New York. I grew up in New York. Anyone who's grown up in New York or has spent any decent amount of time in New York and knew him before he became president know who he is and how he is.
Anybody who reads the news, who ever read the news,
I guess so.
And I think it's very telling. I saw an interview yesterday. Are you aware that the Wisconsin senator or representative has said that January 6th was not a big deal? It wasn't violent and wasn't, he wasn't afraid. And he's just trying to rewrite history. And when a journalist asked his constituents, well, what do you think? People say, well, I don't really know what he said. I haven't read it. I haven't heard it, but I'm sure he has access to information that that supports his reasoning. And it's like, people just don't want to know. They don't want to know.
That's the other thing is, and it's been happening over decades, really, over time, but really ramped up in the past couple of election cycles. That people, well, maybe more than a couple, maybe going back to early 2000s or whatever. Anyway, yeah, I mean, you could go back
or
far,
to the 80s
or to the 80s or to the 1700s. Yeah, it's but more, I would say, more apparent, particularly because of social media, because so many people are unafraid to voice their opinions, and it's out there. So you do see it more. But this sort of suspension of reality,
yeah.
that, or this sort of loyalty to camps, just because somebody is in your camp or in your tribe, and that's a word that's been thrown around a lot. Or just because somebody is of the same affiliation with which you identify politically, religiously, or other forms of identity, that whatever that person says or does it must be true, it must be right, even though it is completely not. Um, that kind of sort of suspension of reality, I just find it really puzzling.
It is. It's also dangerous.
It's very dangerous, yes. And the thing is, it's not happening only on one side of the political aisle. It's happening
right.
everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. You just see demonization on both sides. And if you say, well, wait a minute, I can see this, I can see that, it's like you are just shut out, which is hard for someone like me because I'm a moderate. I'm not,
Yes.
Although moderates seem to be going more and more left in the way the spectrum is going, but I've always been considered a moderate, and I've always voted according to issues, not according to camps. But part of what has happened is, for the white evangelical church, one issue has become the only issue,
which is
abortion.
Okay, yes.
And so the idea of racism or injustice, that's really not that bad, and it's become really, it really isn't pro-life, although people will present it that way. It's really pro-birth, because after birth, there doesn't seem to be a real concern about what happens to the mother and the child, what happens with healthcare, what happens with education, safety or community for those children that have been born. It's only important that they're born. Now, I'm not saying that abortion is the answer.
Right.
I think it's a very complex and nuanced situation. I'm never going to judge somebody who has had an abortion. I'm just never going to go there.
Same here. Yeah.
And at the same time, I have known women who have been forced by their partner to have an abortion when they didn't want to. And those men are on the lines, fighting for abortion because they want to avoid the responsibility of their actions. And I can't get behind that. Forced abortion is another way to abuse women. And
also forced term pregnancies too.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that's why I say it's nuanced. It's not something that one size fits all, and you can't make your politics all about one issue.
Yeah. and even if you did, to basically boil it down to sanctity of life and nothing else.
And nothing else.
And it's not a healthy way to discuss any kind of complex issues.
No, it's not. And we have so many complex issues right now. and people are clinging to simplistic forms of thinking. I think it was Carl Jung, I'm not sure. Someone famous said, thinking is really hard work, and that's why it's so much easier to judge.
Oh, yes. Whoever said that is absolutely right.
Yes. And I find myself too, I'm not saying that I don't judge, because it's very easy to judge. And it's like going back to when we started about counseling and tools and being a better person. Yes, you have those propensities, but you don't give in to them. You catch yourself and you say, no, that's not the person I want to be. You use the tools of, talking yourself down from that. And usually she goes to sleep. I don't know why she keeps doing this.
Is this her nap time?
Yes.
I think it's because she knows you're on the phone. You're talking to somebody.
Well, yeah, at first she usually does that, like any other Zoom meeting. She'll do that at the beginning, but then, by this time she has settled down.
I see. Okay. So how do we get into this?
You had asked me what Grand Rapids was like, because I had moved from Utica to Grand Rapids, and you asked me what it was like, and I went down a rabbit hole.
We went down the rabbit hole. No, but
it's all about forgiveness, though. So
it really is, because even if you think about that, it is, how do you live with, or be in a community with people that right now, the way the political climate is, we vehemently disagree with, and there's so much vitriol and hatred and all kinds of,
oh my gosh, yes,
judgment.
My poor pastor has really taken a lot of heat from people who just don't want to wear masks. They just think it's absolutely abhorrent, and most of those people have left, and which actually, I pray for them, and I pray that they find a place where they can grow spiritually and learn more about, the golden rule and Jesus' teaching. And it takes time. It takes time. And I know that God loves these people madly, dearly, and I do too, but I don't trust them. They've gotten to the point with the vitriol and with the rights issue that I don't trust that you would do what is right for the people around you. So my husband has a heart issue, and if that's an underlying issue, and so if you insist on not wearing a mask around him, you are endangering him. And if he got COVID and ended up in the hospital and ended up dead, I would have had a very hard time going into forgiveness. I mean, I'll just be real honest right there. Your actions, if your actions lead to the death of somebody close to me, forgiveness is going to be really, really hard. And I don't even know how to go there. It was hard enough to forgive my mother.
And she's blood.
Yeah, but she was crazy.
Yeah. So let's get back to your mother.
Let's get back to Mom. Okay.
So you moved out. So
moved out in my early 20s.
So you were living with her
about, I think, 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you moved out, you got married and you moved out.
No, I moved out before I got married. I didn't get married till I was in my 30s.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you were okay, so you moved out in your early 20s. So you weren't living with her for a good deal of time. which includes the 10-year, 11-year estrangement. So altogether, it's what, like 20 years or so?
Altogether what? That I lived with
that, I mean, since you moved out, okay, so since you moved out and since you reconciled, what is the time period there?
Oh, you're gonna make me tell my age, aren't you?
Oh, sorry. No. I didn't mean that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm teasing. You know, some women just will not tell their age. I'm 66, but
I'm 52. There. Now it's out there.
No, it's out. It's a good thing, to be honest and forthright. I moved out in my 20s. I got married in my 30s. I think I was 40-ish when we disconnected. I had given her some options. She was very toxic. She tried to insert herself into my marriage. The very first week I was married, I said, no, it's not going to happen. She was very offended by that. And she just did not understand boundaries. She did not understand how to build relationship. She was funny, you know, and she was a hard worker. But when it came to interpersonal relationships, she was really adrift. And so there came a point where, once again, she was trying to steamroll me about something. And I don't even remember what it was. But I said, okay, this is it. This is it. You've crossed the line. This isn't going to happen anymore. So here's your options. You go to counseling. You go either with me or without me. But that is what you need to do in order to stay in my life. And she was on the phone at that time and she hung up on me. And that was pretty much the answer. That was like in May, and as we were approaching Christmas that year, I started thinking, Christmas, I'm gonna have to call her. I'm gonna have to, you know, go through this whole rigmarole again, because I had kind of taken on that role that my grandmother did, of always being the peacemaker, always being the person who solved all the problems, always being the one who smoothed things over. And I remember this so clearly. I was driving, and a lot of times I turned my car into a prayer mobile because, you know, I'm focused on the road. There's no other distractions. I can just stop. So I'm just driving and I'm whining. My prayer a lot of times ends up being whining, but it's really honest. So I make no apologies. And I'm talking to God and I'm saying, oh, Christmas is coming and I'm going to have to call her, and, you know, I'm going to be the doormat again. And I'm just, you know, really frothing at the mouth, just really complaining about just how unfair it was and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, God is so kind, so much nicer than people really give him credit for. He let me rant. He let me go. I mean, I ranted, and I kind of ran out of steam, and, you know, I was finally done. And JJ, it was like a voice in the back seat. And, you know, I even kind of turned around really quick because I heard a voice say, don't get in my way as I work in her life. And you know, that took me by surprise. I kind of shut up for a second because I was shocked, A, that I heard this voice, and B, that I was getting in the way. I was being helpful.
Yes.
Being good.
It's not about you.
So I said, what? And I heard it again. Only this time it was more of an internal voice. But, you know, and I'm driving silently for a moment, and I just said, can I have 10 years off?
Did you really? Wow.
I did. I said, can I have 10 years off?
You know, I've never thought about it in those terms. You're giving me ideas.
Don't do that to your mom.
Okay.
Ask for a greater amount of peace. But yeah, I that time when I said, can I have 10 years off? I didn't hear the voice, but I did have this sense of peace. And I didn't quite trust that until a full year went past and I didn't hear anything from her. And then I realized I'm going to have 10 years off. I'm going to have breathing space. I'm going to have sanity. I'm going to have peace. And it was a huge gift to me. And I think it was a huge gift to my mother, because I want people to understand that my mother was not an evil person. She was a person who was vastly unable to cope with life and did not have the tools and did not have the strength of character to ask for the tools. She would not go into counseling. She would not admit she was ever wrong. She just couldn't do that. And it's not because she was evil, it's because she was a very, very weak person. And so I got a rest, but she got a rest from trying to be a parent when she didn't know how. She was trying to be a mother to an adult woman who didn't need what she was offering. She wasn't a mother to a child, and she wasn't able to be a mother to a teenager, and she wasn't able to be a mother to an adult. She just wasn't able to do that role. And she got space for God to work in her life too. And, the first couple of years, I just really enjoyed the peace. But after a while, the Lord kind of shepherded me to say, you're not 100% innocent in all of this. You need to get some tools too. And so I went back into counseling to prepare myself for when she came back into my life, because I knew eventually she would. And so I needed to kind of tweak things and grow in different areas of trust and, trusting myself really. And to prepare, because sooner or later, I figured I'd get a call that, she needed some kind of help, because I never, ever thought I'd get a call from her. I thought it would be some family member saying, she's in the hospital, she's dying, she needs you to come. I really, and that's the call I thought I would get. So I was really surprised. When 10 years was up or was coming to the end, I said, can I have another 10?
Don't be greedy.
Yeah, pretty much. I didn't get the voice that time, but I did get an extra year. I got 11. So, but then I got,
yeah. Going back a little bit to what you said, that, God telling you basically that, hey, you need to work on yourself as well.
Me? I'm so wonderful.
Right. Oh no, the way you put it was, you're not all that innocent, I think is how you put it. That that as much as dysfunctional and unequipped as your mother was and contributing to that dysfunctional home, that you are not completely innocent. Now, that's something that's hard to accept, I think, for a lot of people, because they could argue, well, you were just a child, what did you know, and you were just modeling.
Well, and that's
right.
true. It's true.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to tell somebody as a child you were not okay for not standing up to abuse. I'm never going to go down that path.
Right.
And even as a teenager, you're starting to become more aware, and you understand there's injustice here, but you still don't have the tools. You don't. But by the time I was in my 30s, I think the Apostle Paul said, when I was a child, when I became a man, I gave up childish things. And I was still, there was still a part of me on the inside that was that little girl who was experiencing injustice and didn't know how to deal with that effectively. And so one of the things that I learned as a coping mechanism with my mom in my 20s, I learned how to turn the tables on her. So if she was ramping up the crazy on something, I would just turn the tables on her and all of a sudden make it about her and push back really, really hard. And that always disarmed the situation, but it wasn't necessarily the best thing to do.
Right.
I think the first couple of times it was good because it was a wake-up call for her of, okay, no, I can't do this. She never did take the wake-up call, but later in my prayer life, I think it was when I was caring for my mother, the Lord kind of brought these things back. He's a really good counselor in that he knows how to set up a scene, and then he knows when to bring something out to present it. So if you get, thoughts from the past that are just condemning you and harassing you, that's not God, because God doesn't work that way. What he does, he kind of sets the scene and then brings something up and says, let's talk. And so he had set a scene and he brought something up and he said, let's talk. When you were a young woman and your mom started going down certain paths, what did you do? And I had to admit, I would shove right back just as hard because I was mad. I was so angry that I just wasn't going to take it anymore. And so I shoved her back verbally. I never touched her, but I shoved her back verbally very, very hard so that she had no place to hide and she would withdraw. And he said, you know why you did that? And I thought I did. and he just kind of, waited a moment. He said, you didn't trust me to take care of it. Mm. And that's hard. It's true. It's true. I decided that God wasn't doing anything, so I was going to take care of it myself. I was going to turn the tables on her and I was going to push back really, really hard and make her shut up. And his way probably would have been more productive in both of our lives. We might have been able to actually work through those hard conversations had I modeled Christ better. But the thing with modeling Christ is you'll get hurt. I mean, Jesus was killed. And to live the Jesus way, yeah, I've seen miracles. I've seen miracles. I've had miracles happen to me. That has kind of expanded my view of God because I thought it was one way, and he's shown that he's much bigger than my box was. But yet I know people who expect miracles on everything, refuse to get medical help because God can heal them. He can, but he may choose not to. And medical healing is not a second-rate type of healing. Going in for medical help when you need it is not a lack of faith. And so I've seen people, especially in the United States, say that, if you become a Christian, God will make everything easy for you, and God will heal you all the time, and God will solve your problems every time.
That is so wrong.
Well, in a way he does, but not the way you think.
Not the way you think.
Yeah, he'll solve your problems if you get in the mess and work through the mess, and that mess might take 20 years.
Yes.
You know, and yeah, he might heal you instantly through prayer, or it might be through a medical intervention, or it might be through death.
Well,
because in death, you go into eternal life. So you're healed. You know, it's just
exactly, because you know, his goal is not your goal. His goal is not to make your life easy.
I know, and I wish it was.
It's to make you into his image, which, depending on how screwed up you are, you might have to go through a lot of go through the ringer a few times.
A few. I think it's never ending till we die.
Yeah.
I just want to get with the program so that, you know, I don't have to go around that same mountain like the Israelites going around that same mountain over and over again. It's like, I would like a different movement.
Only if we would learn, you know.
I know. You know, I've been going through my journal from the 90s. I've been trying to think, do I really want to keep this? So I've just been rereading it, and I'm like in 96. And for one thing, I can see how global warming is real, because in 95 or 96, we had snow already in November, and it lasted until April. And we didn't have snow here until January this year, and it was gone by the end of February. Wow. So it's like, I forgot about that. I mean, I knew that things are changed, but all you have to do is keep a journal and you will see it. But I also see that I'm whining about the very same things that I whined about in my journal that long ago. It's like, really?
My gosh. Really? I think I was in my 30s. Yeah, I think it was like mid 30s or something. And I was digging through my old stuff, and I came across the journal that I was writing when I was in my maybe early 20s or late teens. And I was reading it, and it's the dribble, you know. It really was on and on and on. And I'm like,
I did throw away my teenage stuff.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And it just goes on and on and on. And
it was cathartic for you at the time.
Yes. And also at the time, I had a rough teenage years. And at the time I wrote profusely. Just it was a very cathartic thing. It's just put everything down on paper, whatever I was feeling, and you know, that's how I vented. I didn't actually talk to anyone, but some of the writing actually were in the forms of letters to my friends.
To tell them what they did?
No. It's just me venting.
Just so you could.
Yeah, it's just me venting.
Good idea.
Yes, but and when I was reading that in my 30s, and I think back, and it was pretty much the same dribble that I would write to my friends, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what wonderful friends I had back then. That they would actually, and these are not short letters. These are pages and pages.
Yeah, I remember as a teenager writing, 10-letter pages, with very cramped, small writing,
A short letter was 3 pages, but on average, it was like 5 to 10. And like, what patience they had. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, sidetrack.
No, it's amazing how we're blessed with really good friends in our teenage years. We all go our different ways, and we don't necessarily see each other anymore. But wow, you have the right people in your life at the right time, I have noticed.
I absolutely believe that. And I think even though your home life was, turbulent and
a disaster, I think is the word you're looking for.
Okay. Even though your home life was a disaster, was a total, what is that word? I can't remember. But anyway, train wreck. Yeah, that's.
Only inside though, the outside nobody knew.
Oh yeah, the outside is pristine. Yeah, nobody would know. Yeah. I mean, I met you 2010 or something like that. No.
I think it was before then. I think it was like
6 or
6,
7.
Maybe?
Yeah, no.
7?
I remember it was 2006 or 7 because that's when I was going to a lot of conferences. Back then.
Yeah, the I Am conference. That was the last one they did, I think.
But that was the first one I attended. So was that the last one they did?
First and last. It was the first one I went to, and I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to go again next year, and
they never did it. Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the rhetoric was they wanted to make it into a movement. So I guess the movement didn't quite take. I don't know.
I think it is. I think Mako Fujimura, who started it, he has really gone further in the concept of culture care, that as artists, we do culture care. And he has written quite a few books and does a lot of lectures. And that's his focus, not so much on conferences, but on trying to create community. But, you know, his intellect is way up here. And, you know, I'm a mid-brow person. So when he's, you know, talking about his, you know, he teaches what, at Princeton or Yale?
I don't know.
And you know, so his way of expressing is much more lofty than perhaps mine, and his art expresses things perhaps on a deeper level. And so I don't pretend that I travel in his circles. You know, it's just, no, I'm just kind of a hanger on. I view it from afar. I'm just, and I agree with him, culture care, because his point is that as Christians and as Christian creatives, that we are tasked with not culture war, which you hear so many,
right.
You know, and I only know of the evangelical. I really don't know if more liturgical communities are saying the same things. But there's always this idea of we're in a culture war, we're in a culture war of values. And I love his viewpoint is that no, we are tasked with culture care. We are creatives and we speak life into culture through art, through story, through music, through podcasts, and that we are tasked with a holy work. Mm-hmm. And so that's where he's going with the movement.
I think the sentiment of war, I think maybe it comes from the concept of the spiritual war, and that somehow sort of seeped into cultural war as well. I feel like that's sort of where the origins are.
Perhaps. Once more, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, but I think part of it too is the patriarchy that has invaded the church, that it's more masculine and worthy to be someone who arms yourself and riots against a system that you deem unjust. That's much more manly than living a life of a servant, mm-hmm. going to a cross, mm-hmm. and living out life that way. And I think if the church had maintained what Jesus had started, which was multicultural, intergenerational, gender neutral, and by gender neutral, I'm not saying that people didn't marry, but that both men and women were honored, you know, were apostles, were, you know, women had churches in their house, so they were church leaders. You know, that's very glossed over, and even rewritten in some translations of the Bible, like Junia who was an apostle, has been renamed Junius because a woman can't be an apostle. So there's this whole patriarchy that embraces, you know, the military aspect. I mean, that's men are aggressive, you know, and And so I think that that's a big part of the problem of culture war, is that it really resonates to a patriarchal system of control.
Yeah. I know the word patriarchy is used in the social construct conversations. I know that it's used in a negative way, but I would argue that true patriarchy is not that. It's the model that
True.
Yeah, it's the
True.
model.
And I'm using it in the social, I'm using it in the societal way.
Yes.
And you're right. You're right. I mean, there are good things about good fathers, you know, church fathers. There are good things about church mothers too. And I would like them to have a voice.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because I mean, if you think about it, we both submit to Christ. It's not, you know, the submission is on both parts. It's not one or the other. There is a functional hierarchy, but that's not necessarily the power dynamic or power structure necessarily. It's not a power structure.
But it has become a power structure.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree. And as with anything, as with everything, our sinful nature has corrupted it.
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of like a sort of a textbook answer, but
it's also true.
It's also true. Now, that said, but you know, the conversation shouldn't end there. It should start by saying, and which is part of the forgiveness too. I think it kind of works into that argument as well, that there are all these corrupt systems, dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional society. The way to fix that is not to combat it in sort of that, you know, the war dynamic, but it is, as you said, through what is it you said that Mako termed? Culture care, right? Through caring, healing, and counseling.
And community is a big part of it.
Yes.
And
but
I think
community, I think the sense of community also has sort of been diluted to the point where community, people, the sense of community is only people who agree with everything I say, community, and that's not community. Community is actually embracing even those people who hate you
or hate your ideals.
Both, I would say.
Well, okay,
yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow. Excuse me. It's a hard thing to do. I don't have solutions. I don't have answers as to like how to actually go about doing all those things. But
I don't think those answers are easy.
Yeah.
I don't think they're birthed in strife. I think they're birthed in real community. And I agree, you know, we've got now, and I really don't know how it's happened. We've gotten to be such a superficial community. I don't know how far you got into the book, but I am amazed at the community that I was in at the time when I first entered into caregiving with Mom, because people came out of the woodwork in my faith community to help in tangible, real ways, in ways that they were able. You know how we were talking about spiritual gifts, and you know, I have the spiritual gift of mercy. I suspect yours is, you know, administration. I think you have a really good combination, because you could work in, you know, financial industries, but you can also work in creative industries. You've got a really great mix going. that
I
I'm just watching unfold and from afar, because I do everything from afar, and it's really neat to watch you shine.
I kind of consider myself master of none.
Yeah, that's a lie.
I kind of actually well, one of the things I kind of lack is discipline in, you know, kind of sticking with something.
Well, you're a generalist, not
Yes.
a, you know, and you know, if you are in a business, or I think I'm a generalist. I think being a generalist has a lot of strengths. You're much more flexible. If you're a specialist, you go deep. That's true. But then what happens when your specialty dries up?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're a generalist, like you are, you're over here doing this, but then all of a sudden you can be a utility player over here, or you can walk away from all of that, travel the world, do some interesting things. And I loved watching. I'm so glad you're reposting your 100-word stories again, because those are just great. I just loved watching you travel the world. It's like, this is my girl. She is doing it.
Yeah, that conversation came up actually on my first episode. I was talking to my guest, a longtime friend.
She she shoved you in that direction again. And good for her.
She did. She's like, oh yeah, you need to do that again. I'm like, okay, I was thinking about doing that, so maybe I should.
Yeah, she was a great guest. She's an interesting woman. She was a great way to start your podcast. She's just a firecracker.
She's coming back. I booked her again because I felt like we were really getting at something good, but then we had been already talking for like 4 hours, and
it was a long podcast.
It was really long.
Two parts.
Only 2 parts because 2 parts. 2 parts because the platform I'm using kept saying this file is too big, so I had to cut it into 2 parts.
Well, so it's part of the learning curve.
So now I'm keeping my podcast at 3 hours is sort of like the maximum, because beyond that, then the file gets too big and I have to cut it into, you know. But anyway, yes. Yeah, thank you for that. It is something that I enjoy doing, but I feel like it's a story from several years ago and sort of not in step with anything that's going on right now. And so part of me is like, I don't know, why am I doing this?
Because you're re-entering the water, because I trust that you will start doing 100-word stories about now. It'll come.
Yeah.
Just kind of easing back into it.
I think so. But also part of it is, well, it's something that I started. Maybe I should finish it, you know. But it's gonna be a while before I finish it at the pace I'm going.
Yeah, I understand. That's okay. Yeah.
So going back to where we were, yes, society. Yes, you were talking about that when you started caring for your mother. So let's sort of like jump to that.
The community part, or something else?
Well, you starting to care for your mother, because that's an interesting story too. It's also sort of a miracle kind of story, how your mother came back into your life.
Yeah, it was. So what do you want? You want me to tell the story?
Yes, if you would. Yeah.
So I had disconnected from my mother, as we had heard earlier, and one day my husband always came home from work to have lunch with me. And he just kind of struck up a conversation one day, and he said, you know, if I ever get a card or letter from your mother, what do you want me to do with it? Now, he asked this because he had seen her full on. He knew how toxic she was. He was a good son-in-law to her, but he did not like how she treated me. And he's a very protective man. And he wanted to know, is this permanent? Do you just not want to ever hear from her again? And at that point, the Lord said, pay attention to this. And it's like, oh no. You know, internally, it's like, oh no. And I said, you know, Mike, if she writes to me, if she sends me something, that means that something's wrong. And I need to know about it because she doesn't have anybody. I'm the only person that she has. So he pulls out this card from his coat pocket and throws it in front of me. And it's like, oh crap. I have to decide right now. I can't ease into this.
I know. And your 10-year vacation is over.
My 11-year vacation is over.
Yes.
I did get a bonus year.
Yes.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. And so I read it, but there were two things that kind of stuck out to me. One, it wasn't her handwriting. It was the way she would phrase things, but it wasn't her handwriting. And there was also a little note in there that said, you know, my name is Jane Ann, and I'm writing this for your mother. And there were just things in it that weren't making sense to me because she was talking about losing her memory, and she, you know, there was just different things. But one of the things that really shocked me was she said, I am your mother, and how did she put it? And I did the wrong thing. I'm the one that hung up, and I am sorry. And I did not know what to do with that because I had never in my life did I ever hear my mother, A, admit that she was wrong, or B, apologize for anything. And so the memory thing didn't make sense, and the apology thing didn't make sense. And so I'm wondering, is this Jane Ann person trying to manipulate something here? Because, you know, what's going on? So Mike is there while I'm reading it. I read it to him. He said, so what are you going to do? I said, I have to call back, you know, to different people, find out what's going on, because no one in my family, and I can go back 3 generations, no one has ever had any kind of dementia. So that's, you know, it's always been cancer and heart disease. And so this was a new thing. So I started calling. I called her pastor, and it took a couple of days to get through. But when I finally did, he said, oh, Jane Ann's my wife. And, you know, your mother did dictate that. No one added anything to it. And then he gave me the background of what was going on, how he'd been kind of working with mom for quite some time. He didn't even know she had a daughter. You know, as far as he didn't know she had ever been married. He didn't know anything about her. And then as she started getting confused, more and more of her story started coming out because she wasn't so self-protected. And she started telling him about her daughter that she hasn't heard from, and why she hadn't heard from me, and things like that. So he said something like, I've been trying for 6 years to get her to apologize. And I was thinking, yeah, but you didn't know that God had given me a break. So you were a little too soon on the timetable there. So I spoke with him and got the details of what was going on. And he told me at that point that she was in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. So I was thinking, okay, I can deal with this. Well, one thing that people with any kind of dementia are good at, it's hiding what they can and can't do, and pretending that they understand something when they don't, because there's a lot of fear, you know, and mom always operated on fear. So she's got that on steroids. And so he didn't really know how far down the line she was. She was actually in mid stages when I finally got involved in her care. And so she apologized. And so I called her and told her that, you know, I had read her letter and I really appreciated that she asked for forgiveness and that I did forgive her. and that I loved her. And she started crying. And she said, I never thought I would hear that. And I'll be honest, I never thought I would say that.
Wow.
You know, that was kind of beyond me. So, so at that point, I made plans to come for a visit, and, you know, said that Mike and I would come for a visit, and told her when. And then a couple of days later, I got a phone call from either the pastor or his wife, and said, she's afraid of you. And I was like, what? And they said, she said, I'm afraid of Donna. She's so strong. She's so much stronger than I am. And this is the woman who always steamrolled over me. It's like, it was not how I thought she pictured me, and it's not how I pictured myself. And to put her at ease, I said, well, why don't you and your wife come with us, and we'll have lunch together. We'll meet at her house, and you can drive her to the restaurant so she doesn't have to be alone with me. You know, we put all of that in place so that she would feel comfortable. And we went to the restaurant, and it was a good first meeting. She couldn't read the menu. I didn't quite catch on at that point. The menu had a lot of pictures, but she no longer really could read well. So that she was pretty far down the path. And after that, I started going once a month to just check on her, see how things were going. It became really clear she needed a lot more help. She was taking things, you know, like chicken out of the freezer, putting it on the counter, letting it thaw out, and then mummify.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was not a clean environment. It just, yeah. And she had some feral cats living with her in the basement. Yeah. It was a mess. And so then I started coming every 2 weeks. Then I was coming every week. And then I was coming twice a week. And, you know, it's a 2.5 hour drive one way. So
this is her Detroit home, where you grew up. Okay.
Yeah.
So she was still there.
So it became clear that she needed someone who would be an advocate and someone who would really look after her. And I really couldn't have her church do that, even though they did help her quite a bit. A little bit too much. I'm trying to clean out her house, and they kept taking her shopping, so she'd bring more stuff in. It's like, please stop taking her shopping. She bought things that didn't fit. And I didn't try them on her. So when I brought her boots to Grand Rapids and tried to put them on, they were like 3 sizes too small. They were cute, but they didn't fit her. So I started cleaning out her house, which was a pit, and started talking to her about moving to Grand Rapids to be closer to me. And I found a place that's only a 1/4 mile away that I thought was just some apartments, but it's actually a senior living campus. So there's condos, then there's apartments, then there's health care, and then there's end of life care.
Yeah.
So it's got all of the stages, and it's very low key. It's a faith-based run organization, and they cater mostly to retired missionaries. So when people have given their life on the mission field and come back, they have no retirement, they have no savings, sometimes their family is, you know, like I know one couple, their family is in Argentina, their children grew up there, married there, that's their home, but they had to come back here because this is their citizenship, but they don't have the support. So a place like Rest Haven has that for missionaries, and they live at a greatly discounted price because they get donations from different churches and things like that. Now, Mom wasn't a missionary, so she didn't get that kind of a discount, but that's okay. I sold off her property and I was able to pay for her care that way. But yeah, it was a ride. It was a ride. And I think part of the reason I was able to get to the place of forgiveness is because she owned that she had sinned against me. She owned it. And that was a big release to me. And you don't always get that with people.
Don't. Yeah.
You don't always get that with people. And so that was a huge grace that God gave me, is that she owned her part of it. So that was big.
Was there a resistance on your mother's part in relocating?
Yes and no. Part of her understood that she needed help. And part of her understood that this really was the only way. But I tried as much as I could to make her apartment look just like her house. I tried to set it up as much as I could in the same way, so that there would be, some sort of familiarity. I had the same furniture. I had the same curtains. I brought, pictures of her parents, and her family to put around her, and some of her church friends. And I encouraged her friends to come visit her whenever they could. And they did, but it's a 2.5-hour drive. And if you work, or if you have a family, you can't just make that trip lightly. And so she, I would take her out every day, and I would take her grocery shopping, and I would take her to the park, and I kept her as active as I could. But in the afternoons, I would leave her in her apartment to kind of maybe take a nap, and so that I could get something done. And it got to be overwhelming for me, because she quickly became very angry. She did realize she needed it, but then she was resentful. She was resentful that I was calling all the shots. She was resentful that her friends were gone. She was resentful that, people weren't calling her. Well, they weren't calling her because she would hang up the phone in the drawer and close the drawer. So it was still off the hook. She just put the receiver in the drawer, and because it was, she didn't have a cell phone. Oh Lord, no, not a cell phone. But she couldn't even operate the TV. It got to be the point where I just kept it on a fairly neutral channel, I thought, and just left it on all the time, because she couldn't change the channels. She couldn't figure that out. And if it was on a movie channel and something violent came on, it would really upset her. But then I put it on the animal channel and found out that they were broadcasting violent things against animals. So I had to change that one. So it was necessary. And at first she understood that, but she quickly got to anger, and quickly got back to the place of pushing those buttons. And I was really, it didn't take long to become frazzled. After about six or 9 months, I was feeling pretty frazzled. And that's when people in my faith community stepped in. My husband stepped in. One woman visited Mom every Friday night after work. She worked in the medical field, so she was tired, and she would come and she would make dinner for Mom and sit and visit with her and watch a movie together. And she and her husband, had talked about it, and they made that sacrifice for me. That's what community will do for you, a real community. Another friend would come and bring her dogs. She has therapy dogs, and she would bring a dog to come and let mom pet and fawn over the dog. And while she was fawning over the dog, she would talk to Sandy, and she would just do that. I didn't even know. And she would come in the afternoon. She didn't tell me she was coming. And
really, they just
she would just go, and she'd keep mom company. And then maybe a week later she'd send me a photo of how she took a picture of mom and the dog, and I put, when were you there? Oh, I go over. It's like people would just do that. And Mike saw how frazzled I was, and so he decided to take over the evening shift. So instead of me going back in the evening to fix dinner and take care of her, he would do that after work. He was working all day. He would do that so that I would have a bit of a break. So yeah, I had some very great people in my life at that time. If that happened to me right now, because people have scattered, Mickey has retired and she's with her children down in Texas, and Sandy is, in her 80s now, and she has, other things to do. And I'm no longer part of that church. It kind of imploded. And I'm part of a church that's trying to build something, we're trying to build an interracial, real community in a more depressed neighborhood. And I'm part of the community. I'm a giver in that community. I'm not a receiver at this point. That will have to be built, and it takes years to build something like that.
Oh yeah.
So I just pray nothing happens to me in the meantime.
How long were you caring for your mother after she moved to
7
Grand
years.
Rapids? Wow, that's a while. That's a long time.
Yeah. I remember starting the journey. I thought to myself, and I prayed. I said, I think I can take it 3 years, Lord. 3 years. Okay. I can do it for 3 years.
Like, no, I think.
I don't think I could even do it for 6 months without a lot of help. And
I think if we knew how long certain journeys are, we would want to
that's
start
the thing. Them. I was sitting on her bed. She had died. In true fashion, I had sat by her bedside for like 3 weeks because she was failing. And I had, she was nonverbal at that time, but I would sing to her, or I would read to her, or I would talk to her just to let her know she wasn't alone. And also, well, I won't tell you about the death process. Americans don't know a lot about the death process, and it's not this lovely death scene in a movie where you just close your eyes. There's a lot to the death process, and I was there walking her through that. And I was sitting in this chair next to her, and my back was killing me. I'd been with her, and I asked the nurse to come in and look at the signs, because there are certain signs that present themselves shortly before death. And I said, I think she's okay, but I would like your opinion. Can I go home and take a shower and just lay down for a moment and let my back relax? And she checked her, and she said, yeah, I think you can. So I leaned over and I said, Mom, I'm going home. I'll be back in about an hour, and I'll see you soon. And it was when I left that she died. So true to herself, she just didn't want me around. So
yeah,
that's how I tell it. I think, I didn't want her to be alone, but she wanted to be by herself in that process. And that's okay. But I was sitting on her bed. They had taken the body away, and I was sitting there, and I looked at the date, and it was almost 7 years to the date that I got the card. And I was thinking, 7 years. If you had told me at the beginning of that journey it was 7 years, I would have killed myself. I would have just slit my throat.
Maybe not that drastic, but
I would have done some serious self-harm so I could get out of it. I really would have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I felt. I don't know that I really would, but that's how I felt. I would have wanted to die. But at the end of it, as I was looking back, I was thinking, wow, that went by fast. And so it's a difference of perspective. When you're going into something, it's a blessing that you don't know. It really is a blessing. Because when you go into something knowing what it's going to take of you, it can actually be harder. It must be hot in New York.
No, I don't know. What's the temperature? Let me check.
Because you said you've got the window open. And
oh no, that's because we usually like it cool.
Oh.
And also, the thing about New York apartments is they give too much heat. I don't know why.
Oh. Okay.
And my building isn't very tall. It's only 6 floors, but I'm on the top floor. So we get the sun from the roof and the heat rising. So yeah. So even all winter, we have to like leave the window cracked open. Otherwise, it's like a sauna in here, a dry sauna.
Yeah, I can tell you've got short sleeves and it's like, oh, you're sweating. And I've got a turtleneck on and I've got the heat on.
I'm not sweating. It's tears.
Really? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. 54 degrees. So it's not hot.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it's a nice, cool spring weather.
Why are you brought to tears?
Oh my gosh, what you're saying, everything. This is it's a very emotional journey.
You have a very compassionate heart.
I don't know. I'm one of those who cry at movies. I'm such a sap, you know.
Oh yeah, well, movies are a safe place to cry. I cry at movies all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's a safety, you know, that's a safety place.
I don't know how to hold back tears. If it comes, it comes.
You know? That is a great gift. I learned to not cry because of the power that it gave to people who were trying to make me cry. So I learned in my teens not to cry. And I carried that around for about a decade, just not crying. And that's not a healthy place to be. That is not healthy. And I was in Stephen's ministry training, and part of the training of that is dealing with your own inner stuff. And one evening, we had to go back to past trauma and talk about it. And I've talked about traumas a lot, you know, through counseling and people asking my story, and I can go right through it. It's like, yeah, this, and people are like, yeah. So I picked a different trauma, something that wasn't family of origin. It was something else, and I went through it. I had already gone through my partner's trauma. I had listened to her and walked her through it, and everybody had left. And I said, you know, we don't have to go through this if you don't want to. She goes, no, you were there with me. I'm going to stay here as long as it takes. So I start going through the and something broke, just broke inside. And I let out this scream and keeled over. God bless Gail, she caught me. And she's smaller than me. She caught me and held on for dear life. And I sobbed for probably a half an hour, so much that I had black eyes. I just broke blood vessels and I looked like a raccoon for,
oh my gosh,
for about a week. So you cry, girl, because you don't want to have an episode like that. It was good. It was healing. I'm really, really glad. But I much rather be open and vulnerable. I think that's a better way to live. Sometimes because of your life circumstances, you can't. But when you get out of those, then you need to heal and get to the point where you can.
Yeah. 7 years.
7 years. 7 years. And my plan.
Yes.
This is my plan. Because I had been a professional artist for 20 years before I started taking care of her. And, 9/11 hit and the art market changed. I still sold well, but things just didn't make sense anymore. And I just kind of lost interest in what had been my passion. And when Mom came into the picture, it was like, well, I can just lay down my art career and I'll pick it up when I'm done. I'll just take a hiatus. Well, then I don't know what I was thinking, but, after such an intense time, it took about a year to just find my bearings again.
Yeah.
Just try to figure out what to do, and do I get a job? What do I do? And at that point, my in-laws started needing assistance. They were not in the same situation as my mother. They had each other, but Dad was starting to go into dementia, and Mom Kemper had heart failure. And so she was frail. She was walking with a walker. She really couldn't keep Dad under control. They had quite a bit of property. They had like 10 acres and they had quite a large house, and they just really needed help. And so once again, I was in the car driving across state, and we did that. I don't know, for a few years, we were just driving back and forth. So I went from one caregiving situation to another, but it wasn't as intense. It wasn't the same. So different things were needed from me. And so I didn't pick up my art career because I was busy being, from a distance for a while, but being another caregiver. And it just, Mom got weaker and weaker. Mom Kemper did not want to move. She just wanted to figure a way to make it work. And it just, and she did it as best she could. She made a way to make it work. And we supported her as much as we could, but it got to a point where it just wasn't possible anymore. And so once again, we moved some parents to Grand Rapids and to a different facility, because Dad would have never done well with a bunch of missionaries. That would not have flown well at all.
Are they not
the missionaries?
How did your mother deal with the missionaries?
Oh, she did actually. She did okay. Yeah. They are by definition a kind and caring lot, and so they just figured out ways. They understood that she was just in need, and God bless them, they just loved her. The staff, I got to tell you, there were times I would get kind of angry. I would go in and the staff called her JoJo, which had she been not in dementia, she would have hated, because one of the reasons that she didn't want to go by Josephine is she didn't want anybody calling her Josie or JoJo. But her name was Josephine Mabel Williams, and for the first 40 years of her life, she went by Mabel, but she hated that name. So when she was 40, she went to Joe. So when people at Rest Haven were introduced to her, they started calling her JoJo, and she just thought that was great. And that's what I was like, really? Okay. So they loved JoJo, and they would tell me, oh, she's so sweet. We love your mother. She's so nice. No, she's not. You get her out of here, and she's just so mean.
You didn't know her during her mean days.
Yeah. Well, the head nurse there had a mother who was very similar. And she called me into her office one day and she goes, I know that it's not the same for you as it is for the other nurses. And I just want you to know, I know what it's like. And it's like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Just Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, that was really sweet. That was really kind of her to say. Yeah.
It was. Well, she lived it. She knew what it was like. So yeah. Everybody loves your mom. She's so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, to you, maybe. Get her in the car. Let me mic her in the car. And then you'll see what she's like.
Yeah. Oh. Wow. So it's like 10 years of caregiving. First 7 years.
More. It was
a little more. Yeah.
Yeah, because Mom Kemper died in 2016. And that just broke my heart. And at that point, Dad no longer had her watching over him and had to be moved into a care unit. So we found another place for him to stay. And we were there every day. But Mike was there more. That was his dad, and he wanted to take care of his dad. And so I was more of a peripheral on that one. But, and he died in 2019. So we were caregiving from 2003 to 2019.
Wow. What is that?
In one form or another.
16 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. Yeah.
It was.
That's a long time. Yeah.
So I'm moving back into art, but it's very, very different. It's I used to do representational art, portraiture and landscapes, and it just doesn't express anything for me anymore. So now I'm trying to move into more abstraction. I'm trying to put prayer into painting. So it's like painting in tongues.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do that. So I'm just kind of trying to figure it out, trying to find a new painting language. So
were you always a representational artist?
Yeah, that's how I was trained. I was trained by a man who was a professional. I went through college, and that was more learning how to draw, what drawing is, and learning to work from a model, and learning how to see. And so once you're kind of cut loose, you have to figure out a way to make it work. And I felt that my training in college was not ideal. So I was thinking about going on for a master's degree, but I also felt it would be more of the same of, just do what you want, the 70s, do what you want, do what you feel, do what you think is cool. And I was more interested in learning a skill level. Even though I'm a generalist, I wanted to learn, how to specialize in the craft of it. So I spent some time looking around, and I found a man who was a professional portrait artist. And rather than going for a graduate degree, I apprenticed with him for about 4 years. So I don't have a piece of paper that says that, I've got this training, but I've got mad skills. I got mad skills that I'm not using anymore because I want to go in a different direction.
You actually have quite a repertoire, I think. You're an artist. You've been doing calligraphy. I think you're teaching yourself calligraphy, and you're a master pun. I don't know. What is that? What's a noun form of pun? Like somebody who does puns.
Punster.
A punster.
I'm a punster.
You're a master punster.
I don't know. I would never get into a punning competition because I am not that fast. I can't do it on the fly. I just kind of ponder things like, that would be good. Yeah.
I can't even do that. I mean, I'm the 100-word stories, I'm trying to make it punchy as I could, but like, no, it's just not coming out that way. I'm just like straight telling the story. I do try to like, at least try to make a point,
Yeah.
of either observation or something, or maybe an internal thought process or something. But no, I'm not, I can't write humor. I can't. I have one funny song and I wasn't even trying to be funny. Um,
I find that I do that a lot with puns. It's like, oh, that's a good pun. Yeah, I meant that. I fall into them a lot of times, so don't give me too much credit.
Oh, yeah, but you recognize it. No, that's still something.
No, somebody else recognizes it. Oh, that's really a good pun. Oh yeah, I meant to do that.
No, I used to love. I haven't really seen much. You know, puns.
I'm off of Facebook. I
Oh,
decided to go off for Lent. I
okay.
gave up coffee, Facebook, and online games. I
Okay.
gave those up because they were all interfering with a deeper life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially, Facebook became so toxic. Even as people went off to go to a more to a different platform where they felt they could, be themselves, there were still people who were being very, very toxic on both sides of the aisles. Nobody has cornered that market. And I just thought, you snooze people for 30 years, 30 days, hoping that they'll work it out of their system, and they come back and it's still the same. And it's, what? I don't have to put myself in the situation. I can just remove myself for a while.
Yeah.
I do plan to come back after Easter, and I will maintain my ministry of mirth. That's what I consider the puns, is a ministry of mirth, to try to get people out of their, sinkholes and come back up and say, oh yeah, there are things to smile about. There are things to hope.
Yeah. I don't know what my podcast is gonna. I'm still sort of in the process of figuring out what this is, but I'm hoping it will turn into something. But every day, I kind of question myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this, and how long am I gonna do it for? I figured with everything I do, I give myself a year, 4 seasons, to
that seems really reasonable.
Right.
That's a lot better than I do. I peter out faster than that.
Like that's how I took any like job, anytime I went for a new job, I would commit to a year, minimum a year. And then after that year, I would decide whether or not to stay or go. But apparently I hate changing jobs. So my last corporate job, I was there a few months shy of 10 years.
Well, you gave them a lot.
I gave him a lot. And the one before that, I was there a little under 11 years. So
yes, kind of like me thinking that I'm going to, go across the country, a few years here, a few years there, a few years there. You get stuck, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You make good connections thing. And
yeah, I do want to sort of circle back to the story with your mother a bit, because one of the things that you said was that, like maybe 7 months in or something like that, that she kind of reverted back to her old ways and started becoming very angry and resentful.
Yeah, I don't think it even took 7 months. It took 7 months for me to burn out, but I think I would say 6 weeks. And she was into being, she was grieving, and she was grieving the only way she knew how, which was to lash out at me. And, she was grieving the loss of her church family. She was grieving the loss of her house. She was grieving the loss of her feral cats because she could no longer, have her kitties. I really tried to figure out a way to bring them over, but that's where my miracle happened. I don't know if you want to talk about that, because that's really weird.
Oh, I mean, if you want to talk about it, yeah, I'm fine.
It's fine by me, but it does make people uncomfortable. So
that's okay. I don't mind making people.
Okay.
I think my crying on air makes people uncomfortable. So it's
I think your tears are like prayers, and I love the picture where God captures each of our tears in a bottle. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So don't be a cry. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
And let other people figure out how to be good with it.
Exactly. It's not my problem. It's theirs.
No, that's right. That's right. Good for you. So with, one of the things Mom was grieving was the loss of her cats, and her cats were feral. They only let her get near them and no one else could. And I was trying to figure out a way to maybe trap them, bring them to my house, get them acclimated so that I could let her have a cat. But she was at the point where she couldn't remember what the plan was. And so I stopped a block away from her house and I said, okay, you're going to get your cat, you're going to put it in the carrier, and I'm going to take it to my house. So I was only a block away, and I'm not talking about a New York block. I'm talking about a suburb block. So I was less than 30 seconds away. I pull into the yard. She's holding the cat. She couldn't remember to put it in the carrier. The cat saw me and started clawing at her, just ripping her front. And I grabbed it to protect Mom, and it bit me for all it was worth. And I got it down on the ground, and I took Mom in and got her taken care of, cleaned up and taken care of. And it was clear right away that I was in trouble because my hand started turning red and inflamed. And it was swelling a lot. It was like 3 times the size of normal. Now, Mom did not notice, she wasn't cognizant that was happening. And I had planned that day to take her out, but what I did, I started cleaning the kitchen and I was soaking my hand in hot soapy water, trying to get the swelling down. And it was getting worse. And so I cleaned up the kitchen and I kept the conversation really, really light, and said, well, it's time for me to go, Mom. I'm going to go now. And I drove myself to the hospital. And they wanted to keep me overnight. And it's like, I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I want to be with my husband. I just don't make me stay here. And they soaked it and they put Benadine on it and they gave me a antibiotic drip. And, they called my primary care physician to let her know what was going on so that she would release me to go. And then if anything happened, I would go to the hospital here. So after I was there several hours, and finally they let me go. And to do that, I had to prop my hand up and drive across. So I was like the Queen Mom. For 2.5 hours, I was driving one-handed, keeping my arm elevated. And I had wanted to go to this conference that was starting that weekend. And it was a conference on prayer. And I had to go to the doctor. They looked at it and they did a circle and they said, if that red goes beyond that line, you get to the hospital right away. So it would go up to that line. I would pray like crazy, and then it would go back. It just kept going back and forth and back and forth. But I couldn't use my hand for writing. And when I'm at a conference, I don't know if you remember, but I take copious notes. That's how I remember things, is I just take a lot of notes. And I couldn't even hold a pen. So it was swollen, but I kept praying. I kept praying, and the red kept going back. So I went to this conference, and I'm sitting next to a woman who's saying, I don't know why I'm here. I don't believe in this stuff. And I said, just, give it a chance, see what happens. And I had asked the prayer team that once they were done praying for the conference, would they come get me and pray for my hand? And, you know, I prayed it, I asked for prayer, and I really don't know what I thought was going to happen. I really don't. I just, you know, just pray for me so that I can make it through the conference, basically was what I was thinking. So a couple came to get me, and I went into another room. I explained what happened. And the husband of the couple had me hold this fat marker because that's about all I could hold. They laid hands on me and they just asked for healing. That's all they did. It was, I don't think it lasted more than 3 to 5 minutes. And I said, thank you. And I went back to the conference, sat next to the lady, and she said, so did it do anything? And I held up my hand. And it looked like a deflated pink balloon. It was normal size again. It wasn't like it was, you know, like this, but it was pink and kind of hanging there. And I said, well, you be the judge because I can use my hand now.
Yeah.
And did you ever watch Friends?
Yeah.
No, Seinfeld. Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Seinfeld. Yeah.
Do you remember when Elaine would go, get out, and she would push people and they would this woman goes, get out, and she pushed me and launched me like over 5 chairs. She was just like, couldn't believe what happened. And I was like, well, I guess I was there for her. But it was, that kind of changed my paradigm and it changed my mindset. Faith prior to that was you accept the teachings of Christ as true. You make a decision to follow those teachings, and you try to live your life according to those teachings, and you read scripture and you pray, you know, and you go into a Christian community of some sort. And so that was my faith walk. And the idea that I would get immediate healing through prayer, while I would give you mental assent to that, well, yeah, that's possible. You know, Jesus raised people from the dead. But the idea that he would do it for me personally and that I would see it was true in theory, but I hadn't experienced it.
Right.
And this was a paradigm shift for me. So yeah, that whole taking care of Mom. But I think it all started with a choice to forgive.
Yes.
Because I think forgiveness is like the coin of the realm in God's kingdom. It's not that God withholds things from you, but if you choose to live in unforgiveness, it's like you put a block on how he can flow in your life. It's not that he won't continue to flow, but maybe not quite the same way. And I'm not saying that people aren't healed if they don't forgive, but I think that forgiveness opened me up to a whole new paradigm. So that it's, Christian life is really strange. Trying to explain it to people is really hard.
It is really hard, and I think that's why we start with just the core gospel.
Yeah,
we're all sinners. Jesus died for your sin, and
because you need all the help you can get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really you need help. You really need help. If you think you can do this on your own, you're wrong. And Jesus came because you need help.
That's the gist of it. Yeah. But earlier, I think you used the term coin. And I don't know if you how intentionally you meant it, but just as you were saying that, I'm like, yes, forgiveness is the only currency.
Yeah, that's another way to put it. It's the currency of heaven.
It is.
And we live as kingdom people. We live in a different kingdom. And so the currency there isn't the almighty dollar, it's forgiveness.
It's not works, or it's not anything. It's forgiveness.
It's forgiveness. And you can't fake forgiveness, and you can't do that as a work. That's a heart issue.
Yes.
That is work. And it's a process. And sometimes there is an artist, Scott McElroy, in Indianapolis, and he has written some books on kingdom artists. And one of the things that he really encourages people to do is to keep a prayer journal and be really raw and honest in it. And when you get, and how he does it is he bases his on the Lord's Prayer. So when you get to forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, he encourages people to just really let it all out. And I find that's true when I'm praying. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with how I pray because I just lay it out there. I don't mince words. Sometimes the words I use are considered vulgar, but it expresses my heart. It expresses the situation. And God is much bigger than those little conventions.
Yes.
And so he's talking about, Scott is talking about when you're putting down how people have betrayed you and how people have sinned against you and how it makes you feel. You know, you're doing that with God, and you may not be able to get to a point of forgiveness in that session. You may not be able to be in a place where you're willing to forgive in that session. But if you get to a point where you're willing to forgive, God smiles on that because you're working the mess out with God. You know, he knows we're not perfect. He knows that things hurt deeply, and he knows that we have to process things. And to pretend that things are okay serves no one and serves nothing. And so work it out as raw and as messy and as vulnerable as you can, and try to get to a point where you're willing to be willing, because it's a process, and eventually you'll get there. It might take years.
Yeah, and that was the thing that and you kind of led right into that without even me asking the question.
I'm just so good that way.
That forgiveness, as much as it is as action, that it is also a process. So with you and your mother, even though when you did reconcile, you have forgiven her, that as she sort of regressed back into her old ways, and then that also triggers certain responses from you that you know, it's not a done deal. It started.
It's a choice. It's a choice, and it's a daily choice, and you have to choose. And sometimes it takes a while to get to that point to choose. But you choose every day to walk in forgiveness. And here's one of the things that, because as I said, I'm all about counseling, and it got, I don't know, 3 years in, I just started seeing myself going into a downward spiral of depression, because I no longer had my career. I no longer had my church community. I no longer had my friends, because when you can't go out and do things because you're taking care of, you know, they've got a life and they've got things to do. So I was feeling more and more isolated. I was feeling more and more resentful, and I was going into depression. So I went back into counseling for a while just to kind of keep my sanity and to have a sounding board. And one of the things that she reminded me of, and I think this applies to forgiveness as well, because I was saying, my mother drove me crazy. I don't love her. I wish she would just drop over dead, plop. And it's like, I mean, I was just telling it the way it was. And I said, there's just no love in me. I have no love. And she said, love isn't a feeling, it's an action. And I say the same thing about forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's an action. It's what you step into, how you react, what you choose to hang on to, what you choose to let go. And it's going to be a challenge all the time. It's not like a done deal. Like you said, it's not one and done. It's like, nope. Sometimes it's every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Every 5 minutes. Yeah. And those things that you were saying to your counselor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. True. Homicidal, suicidal.
I got so many letters.
Double
from
homicide,
people.
Suicide.
Part of the reason I didn't have children is I was afraid that they would end up like my mother and I would kill them before they were 5.
What? No.
Oh, you don't know.
Okay.
And so I thought, I don't want to be in prison. So I just didn't have children because I just didn't want to be that type of person too. I mean, children, that's the most important thing you can do. And to destroy someone's life, I just did not want to go down that path. And so, yeah. But go ahead.
So I mean, you could tell me if this is maybe you don't want to go down there. So it was a choice for you, for Mike to not have children.
Yes. Well, maybe. Turns out I'm most probably infertile. But it was one of those things where it wasn't really an issue to me.
Okay.
So we also made the choice not to.
Okay. So right.
One way or the other, it probably wasn't going to happen.
Because a lot of infertile couples, they either if they can't have children, they either opt to like adopt or surrogate.
In vitro,
in vitro or surrogacy.
Yeah. I chose to be the neighborhood story lady.
Yes.
And so
we need those.
I have because that's great. I used to have a really good children's library. Kids would come, we'd sit on the stoop. I would let them choose what book they would read. I'd have cookies and lemonade. We would read the books and act out the books, and then they would go home. So it's like, I could have kids. We'd have fun. They'd go. It would work just fine. As adults, perfect. They've come back to visit. It's just really sweet. So I get a chance to speak into people's lives every once in a while. But
yeah. So I mean, so it's not like you don't like children. I think in my case,
I love kids, but they're very, very important.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely.
Too important to have an amateur as a parent.
I'm sorry. What parent isn't an amateur when they first become parents?
Well, believe me, some people should not have children. That's just the way it is.
So we have a few more minutes. I just want to kind of go into the book a little bit. So at what point did you decide that this, that you wanted to capture this story on paper?
I journaled all through. Well, I journaled all through the process, and a lot of that I pulled from the journal and which activated my memories, and so I don't know, as people would hear my mother's and my story, at Rest Haven or at other places or at her church, I kept hearing over and over again, you should write a story, you should write a book, you should write a book. It's like, yeah, right, no. And when it was all done, when the whole thing was done, I just felt in prayer that the Lord really did want me to write a book. And I did not, it took me 2 years to write it because it pulled up all of those memories. It's like I relived it all over again. And which is another reason I didn't go back into art, because I was reliving everything. So I did the manuscript. I had a couple of publishers read it. They liked the writing, but they felt that Christian memoir is not something that
it's not sellable.
Sells. There was a time I think there was a time when it was really popular to read memoirs, and it's not so much now. And so I was like, oh, that's fine. I did the process. I worked through it. And look, I just felt like I wasn't off the hook. So I went to someone that I knew who was an agent, who had been an agent. And I said, I'm not looking for an agent. I'm looking for advice. Here's the manuscript. Here's the story. It's got good feedback as far as the writing goes. What do you think? And my hope was that she would say, no, you really can't do this. And she said, I know the person to hook you up with. And she hooked me up with this publisher. So it's published, whether I wanted to or not. So.
Yeah, no, well, I'm glad you did, because over those years, I have, we've been Facebook friends since what, 2006 or 7,
whenever we went to
it
that.
was. Yeah. And so I knew peripherally, some of the things that you were going through, and so I sort of experienced some of that with you.
I would flame on Facebook every once in a while. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Hey, isn't that what Facebook is for?
Apparently.
And then you sprinkle it with puns, so it's a good balance there. So I think it's a worthwhile and also very important story to tell, that a story of forgiveness, because I think there's just not enough of that kind of conversation happening, and I think
because I was very vulnerable in that book, and I did write, a very raw story. I wrote about things that happened to me in my childhood. I wrote about, how I really felt like I wanted to just drop over dead. And those kinds of things, I got so many letters and emails from people who just appreciated somebody saying that, because caregiving, whether it's a husband or a parent, or caregiving for somebody with dementia is hard. Yeah. It's really, really hard. And when people say things about, oh, just rise above it, oh, just let it go, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand how it feels to be constantly attacked. You don't know what it feels to have someone who is so vulnerable that you are caring for, that you want to kill, that your emotions are at the point where you want to grab them by their throat and kill them. You don't know that feeling, and that's good. I'm glad you don't know that feeling. But if you've had that feeling and have to talk yourself down, the last thing you need is somebody being very Pollyannish and saying, oh, it'll all work out, and oh, it's going to be fine, and oh, she's not that bad. Oh, you don't need that. That is not help. And if you listener, if you are out there and you know somebody going through this and you want to say that, shut up. Just shut up. The biggest thing you can do for a person who's in crisis, show up, sit next to them, shut up. If you can't think of a kind or good word to say, if all you can think of is a cliche or, Jesus is the answer, yes, he is, but not right now, okay? If you can't think of something constructive to do to help, your presence is enough. Your presence is enough.
Yeah.
Take your friend to a movie. Take them out for lunch. Let them talk. Let them spew hateful things. Don't try to fix it. Just shut up. If they can go away with one thing, shut up.
And I think that is the perfect note to end this podcast. I am serious.
Well, I'm so glad I could help.
I think that's I think that's sage advice for any situation. If you don't know what to do, or don't know what to whatever, or if you have something, you think you have something wise to say, no, just shut up.
No, shut up. Shut period up period.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Donna, for coming on this podcast and sharing your story. And I think this may be the episode where I cry the most. I thought it was the last one, but
I've missed the last one, but I'm going to go back and watch it.
I actually had to edit out portions of it. I don't like editing, but I had to edit out portions of it because there were these really long pregnant pauses where it was painful for me to sit through, and while I'm watching me, and I'm like, I can't wish this on my worst enemy. It was that painful. So I had to edit out certain segments. But here, I was just silently crying while you were talking. So I think it's much more, you could stomach it much better, I think.
Well, I think too, if you've read the book, you'll cry a lot more.
Oh yeah.
I think, I've had people get really mad at me because, they bought it because they're my friend, and you didn't tell me. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I go around thinking that people know my story. I've told it enough times that I don't even think about it anymore. And so when people see, like when I was born, how Mom said, take it away.
Yeah, that was,
I'm used to it. I've heard it many times. And so but for other people, it's shocking. And so,
yeah, but also, I don't know that, I guess people can feel whatever they feel, but it's difficult though to divulge every single detail of your life to even your closest friends. It's like, how much of one's life can you share? Especially when it's in the
over
past.
Time.
Exactly.
Unfolds over time, and if your friendship hasn't gone in that direction, you share other things, and it but
well, for all those friends, they could say, hey, watch this podcast.
No, they all know now.
But anyway, again, thank you so much, Donna, for your time and your sharing and opening up your life and your story this way. I hope it touches and helps someone out there listening. And thank you everyone for listening and bearing with me through all this. This is Beer Cake with JJ Co. You could find this podcast streaming on most streaming platforms now, Apple, Spotify, Google, what have you. And you can watch the video on YouTube, Beer Cake with JJ Co. And you can also follow me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not on anything else, Twitch or, all the other stuff. That's just way too much to maintain. So anyway.
I don't do Twitter. I do Instagram and Facebook. That's enough.
I actually don't do Twitter. What I do is I post it on Instagram and then have Instagram post it out to Facebook and Twitter.
Good for you. That's one less thing you have to do. So
one less thing. Yeah. So I just kind of like cross post. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for listening.
It's so good to see you, JJ.
It's great to see you.
And have an interaction with you.
I know. Well, you're welcome to come on anytime. We didn't get to talk about your art at all. So I think maybe next time we actually talk about your new artistic adventures.
We'll see where they go.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to following, your progress. Okay. Well, thank you again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
You could stay on a little bit.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll just wave at everybody.
Yeah.